姐儿头上戴着杜鹃花呀，迎着风儿随浪逐彩霞。船儿摇过春水不说话呀，水乡温柔何处是我家？船儿摇过春水不说话呀，随着歌儿滑向梦里的他。嘴儿轻轻唱呀不说话呀，水乡温柔像那梦里的花。嘴儿轻轻唱呀唱不休呀，年华飘过歌声似水流。船儿摇过春水不停留呀，摇到风儿吹破天亮地球。船儿摇过春水不停留呀，鱼儿双双结伴水底游。谁的船歌唱得声悠悠，水乡温柔来到天亮地球。
谁的船歌唱得声悠悠？
谁的船歌唱得声悠悠？
谁家姑娘谁向帆边
谁
走？
家姑娘水向帆边走？
谁的梦中她呀不说话？
梦中她呀不说话？
谁的她呀何处是我家？
她呀何处是我？姐儿头上戴着杜鹃
姐
花，
儿头上戴着杜鹃花，
迎着风儿随浪逐彩霞。
这风儿随浪逐彩霞。
船儿摇过春水不说话，
船儿摇过春水不说
呀，水
话。
乡温柔何处是我家？船儿摇过春水不说话呀，水乡温柔何处是我家？
Okay, just in time. Okay. Hey, I guess I'll move me. I'll move me about there. Hello. Got some stuff to go through, so I figured I'd better get to it. So, for people unacquainted, what we're doing here is looking at the Earth's magnetic anomalies, and blue, low intensity, are regions in which current flowed and flows and is capable of being inflowed into. And purple, pink, magenta, whatever, this one, are regions high intensity are regions that current compacted material, so it does not flow through easily. It runs into resistance. It can still flow through, especially like regions like this where there's openings, avenues through. Regions of relatively low intensity. Even though it's high intensity, it's still relatively low, so it's like an avenue of exhaust when enough pressure of inflow is present to overflow. So there's things like that going on, and the interpretation is that these flows, which can be traced and discerned by various evidences, including earthquakes, and structures themselves, and all sorts of things, geological data, can basically lead us to some insight into earthquakes, their mechanics, and what's really going on fundamentally underneath it all, literally, with these undercurrents that are present, that are unclear what they are. They're probably literally like magmatic in nature, or at least fluid in nature. Water's involved for sure, but even if just to decrease the melting temperature of the rock, which is a function of water's presence. So we've got some new earthquakes to look at. We've been looking at Kamchatka stuff a lot. There's more Kamchatka to look at. I think Kamchatka's maybe not done. I don't know if it'll be over 8 or even over 7, but maybe pushing 7 something. Maybe over 8. I don't know, but obviously. But there are some recent developments in Kamchatka that relate to other things. So let's go back. I looked, my last episode, it was on the 18th. So I probably... Let's just look again exactly. I'm pretty sure it's the 18th. Oh, it's exciting. '19th, okay. So I talked about this stuff in that episode. This is the 12th, but maybe it's worth just going quickly through it, very quickly. I talked about it in more depth in that episode, possibly the one before. I'm not really sure anymore. Things just kind of blur together. But 7.7, so this thread starts when the 7.7 happened on the 12th, which I thought looked like this captured eddy because it's undercurrents, and therefore how I interpret it here in Kamchatka is that there's a northward flow and a southward flow that are interacting. It's possibly that one is just significantly slower than the other, that they're coming the source from different places. They're both still southward flowing, but one is significantly slower than the other, so that they behave like north and southward flowing. Unclear, or vice versa. But I would think southward, if anything. If they're both going one direction, it would be southward with some other current involved that's like from over here somewhere that's trying to exhaust, and this other one is exhausting through, so they're interacting. But I don't think that's what's happening. I think it's literally a northward flow that's basically coming from over here and going through this region, this whole region, up to generally this margin and here, with interacting currents, but generally across here, where when it gets to Japan, which is here, when it gets to Japan, it runs into this resistance and this resistance, which maybe isn't that much, but there might be pressures on the other side that also make it more of a boundary, where they then are, at least in part, directed this way. Some of it actually goes across and is related to Shatsky rise and Hess rise. Thanks there, Benjo. But then that directs it upward into this region, where then it funnels these two directions, I think, based, like, they're literally extended and puncturing through and going through this way, but where it's struggling to go through this way, so it's exhausting like short circuit over here and going this way, but running into southward currents that's also going this way, and they're kind of vying for territory of exhausting this way so that some of the pressures can exhaust. Otherwise, pressure builds up, essentially, so that if one is overwhelming the other, then the one that's being overwhelmed just builds up pressure, which then, like, at all moments is in a constant, like, check. Which one has more pressure? And if the southward current is overextended by overwhelming the northward current, then it will build up pressure on the northward flowing current that then will overwhelm it backward, and they're kind of vibrating back and forth and interacting, where they're like passing each other, but like wide currents. So when they pass, they kind of interact and wobble, basically, or create hard boundaries where the earthquakes are really not happening past because the northward current is reaching a certain point, is my interpretation, which was in the past when it started happening around the 29th of July, and maybe, yeah, since the 8.8 magnitude, at least according to USGS, since that date, they've generally had a margin of exhaust here. But on the 11th of September, I noticed this pattern over the course of the last week in the USGS data, which is not all of the data, but I just thought this is interesting. It looks kind of like this, but where it has some kind of eddy in, like a captured eddy in structure that's not necessarily this that we see, but also in here, like captured in this area, because I think it generally goes up to this thing and across this. Some because it's lower magnitude than this. It struggles to go past this, which is literally like a wall, a much more sturdy wall. Whether or not it's taller in a manner where it like extends taller wise, unclear, although it seems to behave generally like that, is my interpretation, where it's literally like in some kind of a structure where two currents meet, where when one of them goes around the structure, it protects that current from the other current so that they're not interacting as directly. But when that happens, that current is occupying this space here, and the other one's building up pressure, so they're kind of, when that happens, the other one builds up pressure and manages to extend and take over the channel, and maybe simultaneously they're going through this channel, where some of it's going up this way and wrapping back around and just kind of cycling because it has nowhere else to go, but other portions are going out here, cross here, and exhausting from the region entirely, which I think is joining a current that's going this way and down here, where that current is generally this band when it runs against the resistance here, it's getting focused upward this way and making its way through this channel and then going over there and through this channel and going maybe around there, where it ultimately gets over here and goes down that way to go in like a straight path across here generally. Maybe I'm just thinking it might also exhaust into the Arctic, which I interpret to have a flow going this way generally, while there is a flow going across here and across into this region to occupy this side. Okay, let's keep going. But so I noticed this thing on the 11th, and then on, and here's the exhaust path there. Another one, which ended up being a more recent one. So at the time of this, I noticed the earthquakes tended along that path, along this path, and then they generally stopped here and generally started here. And then they had a tendency to be along this outer band, inner band, but especially concentrated in a central band. Maybe not the most evident in the earthquakes that are visible there, and with the overlap and scale that is there, but that's more the scale I chose was for the sake of the magnetic anomalies being visible, and not to really show that this was what the data had, but when zoomed in further, it becomes more apparent. I don't know what I was circling there. Maybe where an earthquake happened. Probably where this 7.7 was. No. But then the next day, after this eddy at this structure, 7.7. I'd say that's pretty predictive. I didn't just show it, I said it appears like it might be shifting further. Oh no, this is more recent, or in a different time. I guess I didn't specifically say it at that one. Since the 7.4, so they kind of shifted. Besides this one, they were mostly down here, and then a 7.4 happened, which then they shifted up here, and then one down there. Just shifting, the energies are shifting. Here's different data that had some more, that still had that one down there, but had even more up here. And here's me just kind of trying to depict it, moving around. This is all in my other videos. High pressure that then kind of helps it push through. This is it exhausting. Exhaust path. And then I just kind of noted that was kind of circular. There's the exhaust path again. Tokyo. Turkey, some other stuff. And then there was satellite measurements that showed the ground shifted eastward and downward in this region where the exhaust is. And then this one I said wobbling interactions on the 17th. Of note, this quake structure yesterday was much further north. Or this quake over here, this one. This one was much further north than the rest, which I was talking about before here. How in this post, just before the 8.8, these two happened, just preceding that were further north. So I thought that was odd. Where the frig? This thing is freaking unnavigable. Outlier for the last month, and this was on the 18th. And then 7.8 magnitude. Which I'm not sure if that's in here. I think that's that one. This is on the 18th. Yeah. Yeah. Which was at 2:58. Oh, it was after this. So after this anomalously north one. So if we see anomalously north, not good indicator. Not the best sign. Some reason it's not letting me see. Oh, there we go. I just said, and then boom, 7.8. Followed by 4 aftershocks, all kind of around it, just north of the magnetic anomaly. So they're all, here's the 8.8, here's the 7.4. The first one, 7.4, and then just after that, on the 29th of July, 8.8. And then the first 7.4 in this month, September 12th, and then the 7.8, and then the other ones are generally around there. I don't know if I put it in there, but I noticed, I don't know if it did something like this, but maybe it still goes in. Like maybe, I don't know. This one seems to be going in here before the magnetic anomaly. But this one maybe goes out, or goes in, and kind of does this thing. Like, it's not just doing this, it's also doing this. But it's more so off of the side here, with a bend around here where it has, like, current flowing into the pressure, and is deflecting around this other current. But where I thought, well, maybe it'll go down to this exhaust point, but it seemed to actually end up not going as far. Like, it didn't quite have the same energy to push as far. So then I talked about that a bit. These ones that were curiously not listed by the USGS, that were preferentially over there. Then I thought, well, maybe it would go this far. It kind of has, but it hasn't really done what I expected. Like, I was expecting it to go more here, and it went actually further. And not quite to either of them. That seemed to be exhaust paths. And then related generally to northward flows from the Arctic to Alaska, but portions that are deflecting westward here that seemed to manage to get through when Sandpoint happened. I wouldn't be surprised if when this sequence in Kamchatka stops, it actually like closes the door over at Sandpoint by another much more major earthquake there. If this really does stop, that might happen. Just a thought. Pretty strong thought, really. If it got that far, activation energy, where it's kind of moving energy pressures. Some other earthquakes. Are we still not past the last episode? Then I was thinking, well, maybe it'll get there based on this. Here's that image again. North-south, and then Gackle Ridge earthquake, which was generally related to all this stuff where the pressure balance is changing. So this flow from the north is struggling to get southward as easily, so it still has to go somewhere, and it just generally flows into the Arctic is my interpretation at this time, at least for a time. Like, it put pressure into the Arctic, which led to a quake, or several, maybe two or three at Gackle Ridge, and then actually my interpretation even further, it's kind of feeding into the Atlantic. But that's like not the optimal energy path, so it's only doing that at higher activation energies where the flows are still there, but they're really filling the vats that they can fill, so they need to find other avenues of exhaust. And then I noticed that that one was very near this one, July 29th at 9 a.m. 10 hours prior to the 8.8. I don't think anything major followed that. And then this was the last 2 months of earthquakes, I guess, at 5.5. As of that date. The 20th of September, which form a chakra type, like literally an outflow avenue exhaust path when the pressures are running into each other and kind of exhausting. Okay, we definitely caught up. I didn't realize we went past it. Okay, let's go back here a little bit. We went past what I have talked about. What? Okay. Okay, I guess it's fine. Another earthquake about 10 hours later from the Gackle Ridge, at Gackle Ridge. So I said, instead of a major Kamchatka quake, it was a repeat at Gackle Ridge, which is odd. Not that I was anticipating an 8.0, but I wouldn't have been especially surprised. What could this mean? I don't know. I just kind of noted it, this pattern. And then also this morning, a quake in the Kamchatka sequence extended southward. So here, they were generally here. There's that one down there, but they were generally up there, and it extended down here. And this is kind of where they've been exhausting since then. Like generally a margin here until they started to vibrate recently, which kind of brought me to stream because I've noticed they are taking more patterns than just kind of arbitrary, random looking. So I was thinking maybe it'll move here. Will it? And then here's my thoughts on how Gackle Ridge is interacting. Here's where the Gackle Ridge earthquakes were, which is noticeably at this margin. And then following generally from Kamchatka, where these earthquakes are, up through this path. Instead of going looping around or looping around earlier, or going out this way and into this region and possibly down into North America. Instead of that, there's a margin here that it can follow where it goes, instead of wrapping in, it goes more along this margin, but then straight along that margin, and generally just straight that way, where then there's northward flows along the Atlantic, along the western margin of the mid-ocean ridge, that are interacting with this pressure and just getting pushed further and further towards the mid-ocean ridge, where on the opposite side, current is generally going southward, so it can't just like push into and flow over here. So as it gets pushed and pushed and pushed, it gets pushed into a point where it can't go any further, and earthquakes happen. That's my interpretation of how they happened, and that they relate also to a cross current here. Like they could have gone further, but there's a cross current that's going across here that's related to here, that then has like this margin holding it straight along this, so that it extends this way, where then it has this margin holding it straight there. So there's structure that holds a current's flow as a actual resistance, all of which contributed to this earthquake over here. But what that points to is that pressures are up here. And what seems to be happening is Kamchatka fills with pressure, and then it exhausts, if possible, it exhausts. Sometimes it exhausts into North America, sometimes into South America, sometimes into the Arctic, sometimes into like the Pacific, basically like through the Pacific into Drake Passage and into the system of the ocean undercurrents. Much more of it like an ocean undercurrent. But sometimes it has nowhere to go and it builds up pressure and an earthquake happens there. Okay, so let's keep going. That's just me talking some more over that. Here's some Greenland earthquakes that seem related as well. Here's another margin going through Greenland to here, where there's like a blue low intensity through path where the earthquakes happened, and then a high intensity margin generally with a path through boundaries where this generally behaves as a wall for currents one way or the other to be flowing, to then interact with maybe other currents that are like finding their ways around the wall rather than through the wall, or kind of going around it and maybe around it out here even. Possibly, I haven't really thought about where these currents are coming from. Maybe this one is pointing at it, so it's very deep, which suggests current flows through it pretty strongly, and so it's probably interacting with that. Really, let's see what that's about. Probably points to something like a major flow over here, maybe, that's kind of directing across. And above the northward bound current and across it here, maybe? I don't know. Or it's going north and cutting into Asia rather than staying along Gackle Ridge. Like, some of it's exhausting into Asia. That kind of makes sense. That it just continued over here too, but it ultimately went this way to open. It's even got like a finger fist action kind of thing. Snake biting. So there's that one. And then also that margin continues over here into Northern Europe. And then into North America. And that'll probably come up again. This is me thinking that I kind of made a hit on this. Which kind of makes me think there's also something going on with Gackle Ridge, because it just points generally there. 11 p.m. September 18th, where the Gackle Ridge ones. 10 hours before this. So I guess 1 a.m. on the 21st, so like a couple days later. Which wasn't exactly predictive. Not when I really looked at it. I really thought it was like me thinking an earthquake would happen there. I mean, it was like a matter of like a single connection being spoken to really verify that was like predictive, let's say. Like I predict. Like I more so was just suggesting there was interaction between the two. But even talking about Gackle Ridge abruptly and like not usually in relation to the earthquakes kind of, to me, is like good enough. But anyway, Kamchatka quakes shifted again, I said, on the 22nd. So this is a cluster of the 22nd. They were just kind of like, I don't know what to make of this right now. And then that cluster was separated from this other cluster. Maybe it's suggestive that the margin of interaction was shifting. Like, this here has like this shape, like a wedge shape, where there's a general northbound and southbound. It's not exactly like retained along this margin. Like it doesn't care. It's also out here in these regions. But it seems like it was bending in here and bending in here, and they were kind of merging into a flow that at least allowed them to coexist without turbulence, essentially. But where maybe this is like the same thing, where the northbound one is kind of being pinched and making it through, but the southbound one is really like going in there too and occupying more of the space, but they're still interacting in like a wedge type thing, but it's not at the magnetic anomaly, so it's not creating the same degree of earthquakes. Maybe I didn't really think about what I was trying to think. Why is this like cluster abruptly happening here? When it was happening, I don't know. Let's see if I said anything. Clustered to the south, but not making it to the exhaust, suggestive that path is still not optimal. But also suggestive northward flows are being cut off, and something could pop soon. Compared to the last 7 days, they are notably further south. So I'm just like, these boundaries are not stable. Something's up. Then I'm like, okay, I need to be more like actually predictive, and not saying like I expect to be correct, but at least if I'm hitting, I want it to be more clear. Like, I need to like recognize and be able to recite like my evidence that I did recognize with post before it happened kind of things. If I'm like, if this is true, then sooner or later I should be able to start being like Barry Bonds. Just slamming, just home run after home run after home run. Oh, Barry Bonds. Oh, shorter range, closer to the 8.8, still resembles this. So I was like, approaching the 8.8, July 23rd to the 28th, had this shape, which is kind of resembling this wedge. A little longer, but generally looking like that wedge. And then this one is the 26th to the 29th. So, like, the boundary is further north. Like, the northward one is actually extended beyond the magnetic anomaly. And the southward one is struggling to get through either of the paths over here. And then the 28th to 29th, same. And then after the 8.8, it shifted to this whole region that's super bounded. And then interestingly, it has this like diagonal here, cluster over there, which I haven't really thought about in particular, which all relate to this magnetic anomaly. Then I said if we see quakes move back north soon, then quiet, because that's generally what happened. They moved back north. They were like this over a week, about. But then, which was, I don't have the number. But then they quieted, where there's just significantly less in the, that's the 23rd to the 29th, so the 23rd to the 25th, those 3 days have all the earthquakes that are removed between these two images, which is probably most of them. I mean, there's only 20 left for the 26th to 29th, and then the 28th to 29th is 7. Or that's probably at least 50 to 100 even, hard to say. At least 50. Really lowballing it. 100's probably highballing it. Let's say 60 at least. Let's just go with 60. I mean, it's noticeably dropped off. And then the 8.8 happened. So that's there. And then we're on the 22nd, 23rd. Let me just look at these other posts because they're like simultaneous. Oh, this is the same thread, right? Same thread. 22nd. So then, of note, while that's happening, this 4.3 happened at Berkeley region, San Francisco area. And then I looked at these quakes and I said, pressure from Kamchatka was going into the Arctic, which led to the Gackle Ridge stuff, but it can only go so much into the Arctic before that is a high pressure region, so it doesn't exhaust there. So instead it exhausts somewhere else, and it's generally exhausts into the Pacific, because I guess Asia is just high pressure in general compared to this area. It seems to not exhaust into Asia very well, and more so, although maybe it is exhausting and that's related to the Afghanistan stuff going on. I don't know. I haven't really thought too much about Asia, honestly. More so thinking it's flowing through this band across, but there may be like exhaust. Like there's certainly suggestions of it, like these straight lines that kind of just cut through. I don't know where they go afterwards though. Maybe there's more going that way. I kind of just cut through, currents going in different directions that are exhausting from this region into Asia, but I think as a whole, like the dominant direction of flow is eastward into Kamchatka and then north and across here and down, while flows up this region are following this general margin up here, but like focusedly through this region, but holding an outer margin out this way, where they're running into here and bending and going this way and flowing this way, which seems to be maybe evident in like the freaking parabolic shape here, where it's literally flowing up here, and some of it maybe goes back down with the southward flowing current, which I feel like it more is over here. Maybe that's in different times though. I don't know. I'm basing this on expansion process in part, and what I know unrelated to earthquakes. Or think I know. You guys figured out. Right? Someone's got to. So I said it's quieting. Earthquakes away from Kamchatka at many places, as if any exhaust paths from the region are also experiencing larger influxes. Outfluxes, I guess. Pressure is building because there's larger outfluxes, which means there's larger pressure in the area. It was my interpretation. Kamchatka, another big one brewing, in my opinion. On the 23rd, don't know if anything has happened yet, but this wobble today is a little curious that we still aren't too. Let's see, I didn't point out also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know why. I think I was numbering them to see if there was any like sequence to them. Like it exhausts this way through the Mendocino fracture zone generally, and then it runs down that way. And then a portion exhausts along this margin that then goes into Peru. And down along this margin and this margin, so that one's also related to exhaust, like generally flowing this way. And then across towards Drake Passage. Also seems to be related to exhaust when it's in this area. Although that seems less direct. Like it's the northward flowing current related stuff, although out here maybe not. But where it's generally just like not happening at Kamchatka, it's happening over here, which is suggestive the pressure's moved over here. Outflows from this region just had to go somewhere, so they moved over here. But then over here starts to build. So then this is the 25th. Let me see, we're at the 25th. Okay, so that's... Then Maracaibo had an earthquake, or 2, or 3. 6.3 and a 6.2 right by Lake Maracaibo, which I've talked about at times, I don't know which episodes. It is the lightning capital of the world, especially I found out more recently over here. Interestingly, in this protruding, like chakra-like region even. Like the whole thing behaves like an ammonite. Chakra, lobe. That's kind of misshapen, maybe. But it behaves like an ammonite and even has some stuff that maybe... I don't know. It's just, I never thought about over there. It looks almost shoved into it. I don't know. That doesn't make sense, though. But that kind of looks like a chakra, too. Protruding chakra. Tears. And then... like chakras tend to be, one side's got more like tears and the other side is like gentler hills. Very odd. There's another chakra over there, like that one. That's where the storms are, related to Catatumbo River. This river. Where it drains into... I think that river. Where it drains into Lake Maracaibo and creates like nightly thunderstorms of great magnitude. But then there's earthquakes that happen here. I was like, that's odd. Hey, Shamsky, I don't recognize your name, but hey, good to see you too. Oops. Looking at these Maracaibo earthquakes that happened the other day. Just going through some of my Twitter posts. But then I thought, well, if pressure is flowing, like I looked at the magnetic anomalies and I said, how does this relate to Kamchatka? How could pressures from Kamchatka flowing out this way generally into this region, making their way along fracture zones into the Americas, how could that lead to an earthquake over here at Lake Maracaibo? Oh, cool. I don't know. Honestly, I don't remember either. Oh man, I'm terrible. I don't know. Has it been a while? It sounds like it's been a while. this margin generally goes to it, but like over here goes to it, and over here, I was concluding for unrelated reasons that flows. Cool. Cool. Well, welcome, welcome. I was interpreting that undercurrents, though, went through Africa and exhausted generally from all of northwestern Africa here, but especially from over here to go across and to go like this way, maybe. Whoa, wow. Mendocino fracture zone goes right across to that margin. Crazy. This did not bode well for Florida. I'm a little concerned. Like, what the fuck, man? I don't know if this place is very hurricane friendly or earthquake friendly. Dear God. But I just thought, well, it seems currents are flowing westward into the Caribbean, and that is interacting with eastward currents, which I hadn't before noticed a relationship to the Mendocino fracture zone going across there, cutting through here, like literally. And just making its way, not as a really strong linear path, but kind of at times. And going over here, and probably other currents going through, like other ways, maybe down, up. That one probably not that way, but other ways through that are generally applying an eastward pressure, a counter to a westward pressure. Yes, but also it goes both ways, so it's like it kind of fills up and it collides with itself, I guess. And maybe the eastward current is like slower westward current, where it's all going generally westward, but at times it's slower, making it behave like it's moving eastward. So it's kind of both. It's unclear. It's very hard to discern exactly. I was just kind of mentioning that with over here where there's northbound and southbound elements. Like here where there's northward pressure, southward pressure, and then there's like a balance of interactions happening. Which seems to be predominantly the south one that is causing all the problems, if you will. But it is it is also westward. It may be that the like rotation. I've definitely suggested that with the global flood itself, which shaped this process. So it would make sense that it just continued with a westward dominant direction of the flow. Which makes me think it's possible it could like run into resistance and almost like go the other way and make the Earth rotate a different direction almost. That would be crazy. Just forces it. It's like a top that's spun too many times and got all rotated and twisted and needs to go the other direction to unravel and rotate and twist to some maximum point and then untwist and go twist the other way. But did I finish this thread? Also a little hard. Quieting, okay, and I was comparing, this was the last day on the 25th, as of 2:30 Eastern, where it didn't really have like a pattern, like it had a general margin, and then some suggestion of the southward one kind of pushing into the northward one, and interacting over there, maybe, or like running into resistance and going generally eastward but recessively westward, so like some portion is cutting across and creating interaction at that margin. The overall picture with several less common locations over here, up here, like things just haven't been happening there. Maracaibo, which I don't know if I finished talking about. No. Suggest exhaust through Kamchatka is possibly generally exhausting the Pacific as well, so like a filled pressure. Yeah, it's like a pressure balance at all times, and like a bunch of little cavities that fill with pressure and have like channels to connect them, and it's really like a fractal molecule where like it's like electrons interacting, where the molecules, atoms are exchanging energy in ways that are like chemistry. And like Maracaibo is like a really strong example of this atomic molecular nature of Earth, where the continents are like atoms, and like North America and South America have a bond, and then like my interpretation is like a hydrogen bond, maybe, where it's kind of like a bond but not really, but it is bonded but not really. And then it has, when it broke apart, it formed over here this region that extends off of South America, and my interpretation is it is like an electron that in Florida is like a region of electron in some way. I'm not sure if it's like an electron of North America. It's hard to like discern what exactly in what way, because it's definitely in multiple ways too, where like it's like an electron but it's also like an atom. On these scales it's much more obvious that way, but Maracaibo seems to especially capture the like actual electron aspect, or like maybe electron shell, empty shell, I guess, like a slot in the electrons to be stable, and like how atoms function kind of thing. I'm not even sure what would be the appropriate description of it. But it's over here, and I noticed if this, like, it goes across all these ways, one of which is to the northern section of the Caribbean, and the other is into northern South America, which goes to Lake Maracaibo, and that seems to relate to generally to the Pacific a little bit more than like maybe like up here, say, or I don't know, or like here. Like there's not so much of a straight path through, like a margin there. So it seems there's some interaction with the Pacific that helps pressurize this location, but where generally current coming across maybe was flowing into here and just couldn't, so it led to earthquakes here. But where it's like flowing through by going this way and around and back and out the other way, literally just kind of looping through off of resistance of currents flowing eastward into, because the Pacific is a lot of eastward pressures actually, where maybe that's actually like a big difference, where the flows are generally going eastward up to like way over here at least. Like all this area is especially predominantly eastward and northward, but in terms of east and west, it's not. Curiously, doesn't seem to be going westward so much as eastward, even though there's definitely westward flows through here that shoved into Australia and probably still do. But a lot of stuff going eastward in the Pacific is interacting with westward, which is probably why there's a lot of subduction in South America, where there's this kind of loop happening, is my interpretation, of course. Like a gas that then is burning with some kind of oxygen inlet, and then like a flame over here where it's literally like a flame exhausting though, like through this portion especially, but inflowing at its side a oxygen inlet to feed the process. It's literally like behaving like a flame. And then I noticed when the Maracaibo things happened that, or the earthquakes, that all of the earthquakes up at Puerto Rico, which I never really talk about Caribbean earthquakes, but so this is like a first for me, kind of looking at the region a little closer, because they tend to have a lot of small earthquakes that are kind of clustered here. And I noticed they all stopped. 7 days they're all there. One day they're not there. Bunch of them, way more than one a day. Like at least three a day. And then there weren't any. And then Maracaibo, which suggests that this pressure going out of here that is going to the Caribbean and interacting with eastward currents was so overwhelmed that it got actually pushed down here and exhausted more so into South America than it was prior, which then led to these earthquakes here, is my interpretation, as part of it. And then, I looked at the last month of earthquakes, and there was a really arced margin of the earthquakes here. Like 30 days, 2.5. Let's see what it shows now. Even the new ones are like at that arc and not past it, suggestive that there are eastward current or westward currents that are running into resistance of an eastward current that maybe is like winning by going around it. Like it's finding ways to get past this eastward current, where the eastward current is being contained. Maybe. Just a thought based on that margin of interaction. It also looks like a turret. Like a freaking. Oh my god. Like legs. Okay. And then even with like a pronged foot there. Maybe. Looks like a freaking turret. Okay, I did terribly on that part, but that's cool. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it implies the turret will shoot. Maybe it's shot around the bend. Doesn't really have the strongest support for that. Like something like this. If it went like this around here to over here, then it would make more sense, but it doesn't really. Although I guess it could go through here and kind of go across that way. I guess we could see some earthquakes over here, like here. Nothing apparently being shot. I don't know what to make of this region. It doesn't look very good, honestly. Like, there's a lot going on here. They're not strong, but it's not, like, weak either. Then another one happened. A 4.5 south of Lake Maracaibo. So here's the one that here and then one over here. So like if there's a current flowing over through this general region that's along this margin initially, it goes to where the Lake Maracaibo earthquakes were, where maybe there's a pressure from the other side and they're kind of, that's where the balance point was. And then if it deflects off of that and goes instead this way, there's an earthquake spot too, which maybe relates to stuff going in and up, like pressure from the other side again. And then if it deflects and goes through here, maybe more at some point I mentioned. This one generally in the lower path, in the nook. Here's me drawing, like, literally there's the earthquake, here's the image I drew. Just unrelatedly. I know, or something. I mean, something's up. Something's up in the Caribbean. It may just be that the crust there is not as sturdy, so it's easier for it to shift, so it just like takes a 4.0 to kind of release some built up energy, so it's less likely maybe to have higher magnitude earthquakes because it just doesn't have the resistance there to build up resistance, where other places are more like rigid and dense and like massive in general, just more mass to resist with. Maybe it's less likely to build up higher, I don't know. Doesn't look very promising, but I haven't really looked that closely at it. Then I said 1, 2, 3, 4 after the Lake Maracaibo was 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the next quakes in South America were 5, 6, which I noticed at the time were just generally like north-south in line with them, and then 7, 8 shifted over and inward, which I saw happening with Kamchatka related stuff when looking at earthquakes there, but they were actually doing the opposite, where they started like here and moved outward. But I thought, well, this is moving inward, so maybe we'll see it move up here if enough energy, like essentially some east and westward currents are interacting and avoiding by going north or south somewhat, so that their balance point of interaction is not directly in opposition. It's more deflected in some way where it's like able to get past each other generally, so they don't tend to interact as directly at times without enough force pushing them into each other, even though there's like other quakes here that maybe don't follow this trend. So I don't know what to make of the whole of every quake that's ever happened there, but lo and behold, it freaking happened though. I said, well, or some other stuff that happened after, I guess. Where did I just freaking go? I feel like it was like just immediately happened. Will the trend continue? Question mark. Oh, here it is. 26th at 125. Pretty much, like, I was pointing more here, but 26th. And then on the 25th at 11:28. And these are noticeably, besides the ones up here, are in the 4.2, 4.5, 4.5, 4.9, 5.3, 5.8, 6.3. But they're in the 4 type of range, so I feel like this one was pretty, like, this one's predicted. I mean, it was 12 to 15 hours or something. Yeah, totally. In terms of the solar winds, totally. I definitely don't look at that stuff enough. I only see it with other people's analysis. I mean, oh man, I heard something that made me think of you, Echo. Like today or yesterday, I can't even remember what it was. I think it was a video on the Ring of Fire, and let's see what my watch history is. This was a pretty good movie, Sahara. Pretty good. Maybe a little I don't know. Some Pacific video. I might have went by it. Not that one. Probably not this one, maybe this one. I might have been this one. Spent a lot of time in South America. It's probably this one. I forget what he said, but it totally brought moon hitting the area to mind. Oh man, what's his name, man? Man on the Moon, maybe? Oh, what's his name? There it is. He's got interesting stuff that's related to the moon, and I don't know what that. I'm not saying I agree per se. I'm not sure if I can even find it very easily. The genesis of Earth and the Moon. He's definitely drawing relationships that are very curious. Or like relating the Earth to the Moon. My thought is, if what he's saying has any merit at all, which I think it does, that there are some kind of like similarities. I'm not sure if this analysis here per se is the best, but and this is also 4 years old, so I'm sure he's added thoughts to this. It's curious that he uses South America a lot. I don't know what he's getting at here. Very much relating the moon to the planet. So my point though is, if this is valid in any way, where like the moon truly resembles the Earth, it strongly suggests that the moon is related in like a closer way, where maybe it did form in relationship to South America. I don't know. It's hard to say. I've been entertaining all sorts of things. Like, I even think about if the universe is a projection from inside the Earth, and everything we see is from inside the Earth. I think about it, I ponder, and I wonder. I don't know. I don't have any conclusive proof otherwise. And I definitely see, like, reasons to consider it. I mean, it seems kind of ridiculous. And I certainly would be, like, the last person to have thought that at sometimes, but, I see some potentials. So I don't even know what to make anymore of stuff when it comes to, like, the universe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I've got some theories. I don't know how they align. I interpret that Mercury is going to become Venus, and Venus is by a supernova of the planet, a nova, my planetary nova of Mercury, that then makes Venus become Earth, Earth become Mars, Mars to get destroyed and shoved to the Kuiper Belt, or asteroid belt, and the moon or the sun poops out a new planet of Mercury as from Vulcan that was hidden within the actual structure of the photosphere. Yeah, that's definitely related to like flood heat too, like friction. This is a cool image. Yeah, valid to put the freaking cosmos shape over the ammonite shape of the Pacific. Let me see where. I can get through these far north earthquakes up here, which I then mapped here and here. A general margin, especially along here, and then along there to that one. And then this looks almost like a short circuit, which is interesting because there was one over here. So if we follow that path up there, like a short circuit path. Why it would be short circuiting through Greenland, I don't know. Maybe it's thawing, like allowing. Sometimes I wonder if like it's frozen. A lot of it's like frozen. Because I think the Earth, the interpretation that pressure increases downward isn't always true. Like if you got layers like this, and the weight of this just keeps adding, so its weight goes up. It doesn't fucking matter if there's some structure that's holding it, that has a cavity. like this area does not have, it's like a house. There's not the pressure of the roof on the freaking people inside. Definitely as above, so below. It's definitely cool, and the concept of infinity and that the Earth is like a speck inside of the infinite cosmos is very appealing. And that's kind of what my theory of everything model is based on. But sometimes I wonder, like some ancient like ideas seem to suggest things that point me to think: is it possible that like every light in space is really inner Earth, like holographically almost projected? So like it's still fractal all the way down kind of thing, but it's all just seeing like aspects of the Earth from a different angle. So it's not in the same way where like the whole universe then is like Earth, and it does like it's with everything is within and hollow like illusorily outside, like an illusion. Oh. It's kind of like how it seems to be in truth anyway. Like it's all in the mind of God and not in some space. But my thought is Earth is like skeletal. There's structures that exist that form like by current flows, but that end up being like pillars that aren't necessarily up down, but like almost like some kind of ball with just like pillars outward as support structures that support the pressure. So a lot of pressures on those. But then between those support structures, relatively less pressure exists, where the inner Earth, what I was like getting at initially was that is maybe with regard to Greenland with the short circuit path that's there. And when I said maybe it's melting, I thought maybe it's possible that like this blue, even though it's blue, has more like frozenness. Like water is frozen in those cavities. Stuff is frozen solid in those cavities that are melting along the edges. That's why, especially, I was thinking, because it's kind of along the edge. It's very curious. Makes me think of melting. It's totally possible. Or it's always been inner Earth all along. That's all. That would be interesting. I think about it a lot. Like if Hawaii is like a chakra and like the world wraps around in some way, and the somehow it's all inside of a like rock, like a shallogram kind of thing. I don't know. I think it's possible, but it's hard to discern what's like actually the case. Not just like accept things because they seem pretty sweet. If it's all like that. I mean, pretty sweet as a good basis. The sphere of Hawaii is pretty sweet. This all generally suggests, in combination with recent Gackle Ridge quakes and the recent tendency of earthquakes in the Americas more so than Western Pacific near Kamchatka, so there's just been, at this time, on the 26th, there was just like a relatively good amount over here compared to over here, even though maybe not the same magnitudes, so maybe not as much overall energy, I'm not sure. But some pretty big ones that were just in places they hadn't been in the recent history, at least. That gave me the impression that maybe it's exhausting into first into the Arctic, but then through the Arctic, and then also eastward into North America. That maybe is also interacting with through the Arctic currents. Even though this is kind of on the wrong side, through the Arctic would maybe be more likely to be showing up over here. Maybe my thoughts initially, at least. Undercurrents to through Kamchatka are redirecting in the Arctic and then the Atlantic as well. And then I just kind of noted that place going on by Oregon. Generally in line with those. I don't know. And then I looked more specifically at those. The 4.7 in Afghanistan here. And then China, Japan. 4.7 was right above the mantle puncture hole. Like at its actual like margin above. Even though I didn't draw it well. Like that margin is the same coordinate east-west as this earthquake. So freaking Big Bang. Not a fan of the Big Bang. I feel like, well, then this quake happened at Guayaquil where I predicted. I was pretty stoked. This one made me pretty stoked. I'm like, oh shit. I'm gonna get happy about earthquakes. Oh, I predicted the earthquake. Oh, wow. Exciting. Which to me said like the activation energy to get there was there from the Maracaibo and down Chile, moving westward through Colombia and Peru to Maracaibo or Guayaquil region in Ecuador. Maracaibo. Yeah, I mean, things expand like supernovas and so on, but it's just in a classical framework, is how I feel. That's infinite and eternal, but also I still wonder if it's all illusory and projected from inner Earth, which is itself like a black hole, but inside of it contains the universe. And it's all within the Earth. Sometimes I wonder. That'll be cool. That'll be super cool if someday we found out, like, scientifically, that the sun was the core of the Earth, let's say. And, like, scientifically understood the sun wasn't just something that the Earth was orbiting. Instead, it was something that the Earth had at its center that was projecting through its pole and like scientifically redirecting the light back at the Earth in a systematic way, almost like a magnifying glass, though. where it creates like a focal point. Yeah, expansion is fine. It's just expansion of space specifically, and not just like expansion in a three-dimensional way. Expansion of space is dependent on just kind of ignoring the like point of physics, where it's like the objective is to explain everything with as little as possible, and inserting expansion of space is just like fundamentally illogical and against the whole point of science. But that's just not the same. Like it's like if it's expanding, it's in something that contains it still. Like it's still contained in something that's not expanding. Whereas space expansion implies a universal thing that's just happening innately. That maybe we can like suppose, if we accept it to be like a fractal thing where we just see expansion by happenstance, and it can also contract at a later point, and therefore expansion and contraction, like Penrose talks about kind of stuff, but it's all fundamentally hinges on Hubble's law, the observation of all distant redshifted galaxies, and interpreting that to be a law, which is really just a correlation that was observed, but to make it fundamental, it has to be interpreted as a law and called Hubble's law, at which point they excuse themselves to introduce a new underlying fundamental called expansion of space, which functionally behaves like Doppler shift, but from a physics standpoint does not break the laws of physics, and so allows them to explain the observation of expansion of space, which is, or of all distant redshifted galaxies by expansion of space, but it just ignores the philosophically unsoundness of it all, where that's not like how science works. We don't make an observation and say it's fundamental and introduce a new underlying thing to all of reality called that fundamental thing. Instead, like, for example, the speed of light was believed to be infinite. Yeah, I mean that's the problem. Is it's classical mechanics. It's not like it's quantum. It's not actually any of the things of modern physics. They're all best fit false, best fit overlays that are like at their core false. I mean, I don't have a job. This is kind of my job. This is me kind of trying to justify my existence so I can understand. Okay, what else I got in here real quick? It's because it's wrong. That's the problem. It's caught up. It's like caught in a nook. and no progress is being actually made, like, relative to where we are, because false theories dominate and no alternatives are allowed to be, like, seriously considered. That's how science just is, period. It's a fucking charade. It's bullshit. It's not actually what it claims to be. At its core, it's not science. Like, the concept of science is one thing, but the behaviors are not being it's just not adhered to. Yeah, it's some fucking bullshit. It's such bullshit. As someone who, like, cannot speak and has been ostracized by society because I disagreed. Like, had I agreed, I probably would have been, like, recognized for something by now. If I was just agreeable. It's literally, that's the problem. It's not about what people think, though, but they like control the narrative, so it is. It's literally what we think. What we think goes. And because we've taught so many people that line of reasoning, everyone fucking thinks that way. That is, like, in a position of authority. It's all fucking rigged. Some fucking bullshit, rigged ass system. Still no Cam, by the way, where I started, still no Kamchatka quakes past this line. Some changes have happened since this. And then again, still none past here. This is all after the 7.8. I'm like, it's gotta be moving south, but it seems to be stuck here. So 1, 2. This one's worth kind of looking at the pattern. Up here north of the magnetic anomaly. And then way down at the margin, but over at the far side. And then back up. And then center just below the magnetic anomaly. Let me see if I have this. I didn't bother. But it's just below. And then above. And then down at the margin again, but outside instead of inside. Maybe, like, energies already had filled that way. And this is generally the preferential path, but then 10 almost suggests it's gonna get through. Ten is 1 here, and then after that one, 2, 3, 4. So it kind of moved back north. Did some odd things. And I just drew those earthquakes. These are the earthquakes at Kamchatka now. One of these 4. In the past 24 hours on the 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I said, well, it looks like maybe current coming through this way is managing to go along here, but southward current is kind of holding a margin up to there and going this way, and this is a exhaust path where some are happening. And then there's that earthquake, that one for those 4. And then today, I said, wait a minute. I took a day off. I've been, like, posting all Kamchatka, an update a day, even if it's boring, just to, like, keep track of it. But I didn't do the 27th. So I got shit. But this was the last day. I'm like, okay, it's doing this wobble thing again. Which I mentioned in this post. Where the frick? This thing. This wobble was on the 18th, or the 17th, and then on the 18th was a 7.8, suggestive this wobble maybe points to some kind of, okay, building energy, something's gotta give kind of thing. And then we see the wobble today. Here, which also has a two maybe erupt one. This one's maybe erupt. This one's erupting. So there's also volcanoes erupting up here. Not there, at least on here. And then here, almost like where this margin is getting closer, which then suggests the margin actually continues up there. And then I looked, well, why don't I include 2 days by looking at this one, which has all the data, or more data. And I noticed orange is still where today's quakes were, up here. But then after generally this margin where the exhaust path was happening, where they weren't really passing here, when it passed here, it went from over here yesterday to today over this way. Like it shifted. It's like a bow flexing in some way. I don't know what to make of it all. Like, I feel like it implies something's up. I don't know. And then I mentioned here, when this happened, this second image, a distal earthquake in both directions occurred to break the repetition of quakes at the margin. So before, at least on USGS, before it moved past this margin, there was one over here and one up here. Like, they were kind of concentrated, and then they went all the way down here and out, and then all the way up here and over, opposite one another too. Like, pressures were just abruptly moved. Something happened where they were able to change the flow patterns in some way that led to, from them just happening along this margin, especially here and some up here in this like wedge region, to this arc. Like, it just changes form. No arc. Maybe you could see an arc a little bit, but really no arc. Arc. Like, something's up. Let's see if anything's happened. And then I posted something else. Sorry, Stefan. I posted directly to Stefan, so let's find it. In relationship to this one. He played this video, I'm like, that's weird. This place here is kind of popping off way early. This is the Cascade earthquake, but on the 9th. And then when it starts around there, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this, I know it's just data flashing from these sensors, but it looks like an eddy happens here when this wave cuts across the location where they're already happening way ahead of time. way ahead of time. Something's going on over here. And then the wave starts to get forward and almost like branches forward like lightning as it approaches it. I don't know, maybe that's based on the amount of data there. But when it gets there, it like looks like it's freaking eddying. And then it moves on, and maybe it looks like it's eddying over here, I was thinking. Like, so maybe it's not in some way. But it caught my attention. I said, well, this looks like it's eddying. Like an actual rotational element is happening where the energy is propagating, but something happened here where it actually manifested in an eddy at that location. And I pointed out in the second video that location is nothing's going on. And nothing seems to be going on, but it's like way less data. And I noticed, well, it's not the same data as if I go dp.gmv. I had it open. There we go. 20, or this is the 9th. So this is what we just saw with the eddy looking thing there. So there's HH. So this one's got HH band specifically, which high something HH band, I forget. Earthquake. HH's band, high gain, high frequency. That's it. High gain, high frequency band. When they use those sensors, it pops off there and looks like an eddy passing. It stays going longer than elsewhere. Seems to be freaking going the whole time. Then, if we go to the recent one, that's fucking not good. It still looks like it eddies. Then I said, here's where that eddy is. Eddy in data. I don't know. And then I noticed, here's that earthquake that created the ripples. And here's Valmy, where these ones are happening. Over the last month, this location happens to be along the direct path to this eddy and data location, which happens to be abutting this magnetic anomaly and like occupying this portion up here, and then almost looking like it's in some kind of eddy spot like here. And if we look down here, there's like a eddy spot here, adjacent. And what does that mean? It means there's some kind of nook between them, above them, that would support an eddy. So it kind of makes sense that there's an eddy there. So it kind of fits in that regard. And it generally relates there, but also other stuff going on, like this one goes across and over and down and over and generally goes there. This one goes over and splits and goes up this way and generally goes there, goes down this way. This one doesn't go there, but where these fracture zones seem to be interacting over there too. And then I said 3.7 there. And then like this morning, I'm like, there was a 3.7 where the frickin' eddy thing happened. And then I look at the data, and I'm like, wait a minute. It's like centered on this circle of earthquakes. Like, what the fuck, dude? In Oklahoma. The eddies seem to be more here in the data, but I mean... This one was there, so what we're seeing now extends down into the magnetic anomaly somewhat, which is not unheard of in my interpretations for the currents to be able to extend over top it. It's just a higher resistance, but eddies do tend to have like a ammonite particularly. Like where they'll form into resistance with like a actual resistance, where an eddy is happening against resistance that supports the eddy in place. So it kind of, and it cuts into, in that case, and probably in this case, if the eddy is strong enough. Okay, I think we made it through my general thoughts. My posts, I don't know what to make of. It looks like something's up here too. These two relate to each other. Like flows going down here, then run into resistance and go up this way. Just kind of boop. These are just super connected, and for some reason it seems like it's a spray point. Spray gun that just sprays into this region, some of which goes over here, interacting with other currents going this way, but this seems to be a thing. I do not like how this looks for Florida. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Oh my god. Let's say 1600 draw. Keep it away from there. Probably too many over here. Oh, 9. Wow, nothing. 7.0 in South Carolina. A little surprised there's not anything in here in Florida above a 4.5. That's enough for there to be nothing. 2006 at 5.9 in the Gulf. Well, let's see where that one was. Maybe like out here. 26.3, 86.6. 26.3, 86.6. About there. It's kind of out in the open. That's a little odd. Odd. Also, this Oklahoma region seems to be super activity, human activity related. Oops. That's not what I was trying to do. A bunch of these. Quarry blast, 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 quarry blast. Bunch of quarry blasts. And they're generally following what must be some structure geologically that is related to why there's an eddy happening here. I'm thinking. I don't think they're like creating the eddy. I think they're playing with freaking fire. Like, that does not look good. What is going on there? I don't really even know what the hell to make of it. Just one earthquake right there. I guess most of these are not earthquakes. The earthquakes are more over here. It kind of resembles one of those things, like this. Kinda in the same path from there. No, that's that one. Oh, it's at the frickin'. It's happening here. At this center of this like swastika of energy flow. Oh. I don't know what to make of it. Not to call it a swastika, maybe a window. I just like to acknowledge it as a Hindu symbol and not really care about any hostage situations. I think I'm tired enough. I might just dip out here, guys. been a pleasure. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging. Always cool if people are there. I'm like, oh man. Some of those nights I'm just by myself the whole time. Like, oh, I'm freaking struggling to even go. Cool. You guys too. Till next time, peace out. Later.